All right everyone, we have full clan status, Kushina said waving her papers around. The Uzumaki family grinned and gave a thumbs up. There wasn't many of them, but it was enough to be considered a clan in their own right. Also, we're having a dinner with the Hyuga clan next week, so everyone prepare for it, Kushina said as the others nodded. Alright Yuri-chan, now that we've warmed up, now is the time for you to start sealing. I'll leave this clone with you for a little bit. I won't be long, Naruto said, and Yuri nodded happily as she watched Naruto leave. Alright then Yuri-chan, let's get started, the Naruto clone said, and Yuri nodded. Hi Naruto ni, Yuri said to him as the two sat down. Meanwhile, Naruto entered into the forest and took out his sword. Kuchio's no jutsu. Shakan no mai, Naruto shouted as he slammed his hand on the ground. He sent out a wave of honsho through the ground and air as three figures came in front of him. Names, Naruto said. Since losing Fujika's as one of the summons that he had to keep in his sword, Naruto need others. Since going up another level by Shinden, Naruto's capacity to hold in his sword increased from 5 to 6. He only had Pakura, Kimimaro and Dan. None of them really cared about being revived. They actually liked being spirits better, but now Naruto had 3 more to work with. My name is Gari, Shikyo-sama. I was from Iwagakure, the man said. He wore the standard Iwa flak jacket and his spiky hair was even more apparent than Naruto's. The blonde smiled as he turned to the next person. I am Yahiko Shikyo-sama. I was from Omegakure, he said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes while he looked at the man named Yahiko. He had short spiky orange hair and brown eyes. He wore a long black robe with a red line running down the center along with armor that covered only his midsection with a pouch attached to it. He also carried a relatively large sword on his back. Yahiko from Omegakure. Nice to meet you, Naruto said, and Yahiko bowed a little lower. Naruto then turned his head and glared. Your name? He asked, and the person bowed. She offered a smile and straightened herself. I am Suiren Shikyo-sama. I am at your humble service. I am from Kurigakure, she said to him. Naruto nodded again as he learned about them. Gaki was a person of Iwa's explosion corps, Suiren was a water release style woman who knew a better form of kenjutsu. Yahiko, much to Naruto's irritation, said that he was the leader of Akatsuki, or at least its former leader. He had asked why Naruto was so angry with him, and Naruto was more than happy to tell him, needless to say, but this involved Naruto apologizing and Yahiko to be very, very surprised. He looked down at the ground in shame. And no, that's not what I envisioned, Yahiko said before he looked up at Naruto. Shikyo-sama, please take me as a summon. I vow to use my abilities to your service and let me find the person responsible for this, Yahiko said, and Naruto nodded. Very well. How about you Gari, Suiren? Will you help me as well with Pakura, Dan and Kimimaro? Naruto asked. Hi Shikyo-sama. They said, and they all went into the blonde's sword. Naruto sheathed the sword and smiled. However, he wanted to see Jiraiya. Something wasn't adding up here. Lightning Country. Akiko snarled as she slammed her desk. She looked left and right as she noticed her subordinates around the room. Those who ranged from Kumo shinobi, to missing nin, directly to shinobi from other nations. Damn it, how did they find out? Danzo, this is all your fault. Now I have to be more discreet than ever. HMPH, well, fortunately I still have an ace up my sleeve, no doubt that old Warhawk does too, or he wouldn't have lasted this long in the world. Let's see, what can I do that will bring the plans together? Akiko wondered as she looked at her fireplace. She saw the fires cackle left and right, and before long she widened her eyes and smiled. I think I might just have an idea on what to do here. Akira, bring me Kabuto-san, Akiko said, and the man named Akira bowed before he quickly spun on his heel and left. Just as he left, someone else came to the ground with a mask from Root. Akiko smiled and walked up to him. Danzo had better be weary, for I even have spies in his organization. Isn't that right, Tawa? Akiko asked to the emotionless Anbu. Tawa just looked at the elderly councilwoman while she propped one foot over the other. So much strength, but not the mind to even go through with it. You want to try and kill me, don't you? Akiko asked. Tawa remained emotionless and did nothing while Akiko chuckled. She shook her head and stood to her feet. Well, whatever, you aren't following me to talk. Tell me, Tawa, do you miss Kamachi? Akiko asked, and Tawa closed his eyes behind his mask. No, Akiko-sama, he said, and Akiko nodded. I see. Very good. Then you are to go kill her immediately. Also when you're done be sure to bring her body back to me. I don't care how you do it, she said and Tao bowed before quickly leaving. Akiko smiled and the fire behind her intensified her gaze. Don't worry Danzo, I'll take good care of everything. Just like I've always done. After all, who can resist an elderly woman's pains? Akiko asked at nothing before she got up and left. Chapter 36. Just because it's legal, doesn't make it right, by Raiden of Metal Gear Rising. Hokage Mansion. Naruto ascended the stairs of the mansion as he thought over what Yahiko had told him. It had definitely made Naruto mad that the man was connected to Akatsuki, let alone its founder, but when the blonde had heard that his summon was connected to Jiraiya, and the fact that Akatsuki was, as he put it, not for its original purpose, then he really had to go and see Tsunade about it. Maybe she could shed some light on Jiraiya's location and his knowledge. Not to mention that he had to wonder why his Iwa summon had agreed to be so readily used by him, but maybe it was a respect issue. He wasn't sure. Either way, Naruto had to get some answers. He came up to the door and was ready to knock on it. And you're sure that you need to get this done? Naruto heard Tsunade's voice through the door and he raised an eyebrow. That's right. Yuna, Ka-chan and I are going to start searching. We've lost enough time as it is. Naruto heard Sasuke's voice and figured that this had something to do with Yuna and Makoto. With how the words went, he figured that this had something to do Itachi. Sasuke did have to cut his search short for Yuri since she was kidnapped by Obito. Seeking of the Uchiha ass, Naruto had to have something of a talk with Rin and Kakashi, or they had to have one together. Naruto didn't even know how he had the power to control Kurama, but he had to put it off. He also knew that he'd have to come up with something else of hitting him. If he could phase like he had then he wouldn't be as subtle as the last time, but Naruto regressed. It's time that we actually found my older son. There is no need to stall this anymore. Once we have talked things over then we will have Itachi come to a decision. Either to return with us or remain to gather information about Akatsuki, but either way I can't diverge Sasuke from this path. If he needs to see Itachi then Yuna and I will back him up. I need to see him as well, Makoto said and Naruto heard Tsunade give an affirmative grunt. Thanks to some training by his mother and by Shin, Naruto had been able to apply the uses of Honsho to sensor capabilities. He could, sort of, see how they were acting. I see, well that's responsible, but I think it would be better if Itachi doesn't come back to Kana, Tsunade said dejectedly. Naruto immediately heard surprise as he heard a slam of a desk. He narrowed his eyes, but he was sure that the Anbu would do something if Sasuke or Yuna did something unnecessary. Why not? Would it bring dishonor to Konoha to have one of its traitors in the village again? Sasuke asked, shouted and Naruto heard a shushing noise and figured that it was from Yuna. For a tomboy, or something like that, she really had feminine wiles, or so Naruto wanted to figure. Shut it brat. That's not what I meant. I'm saying that I'd rather not have another Tsukumo Hatake on my hands, Tsunade said and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Kakashi had remembered his father, or at least his house, but still it only made Naruto wonder what had happened to the man. That's Kakashi-san's father right? Yuna asked. Naruto didn't see it, but he was sure that Tsunade nodded while he figured she would put her hands on her desk to explain in a better tone. That's right. Because of what he had done he committed suicide. He showed all the signs that he was an upright man and I fear that even if the truth is brought out, Itachi's fate won't change. In fact, I fear that if the truth does come then the village will be weary of all of you. Not to mention that chance for you to rebuild your clan, Tsunade said and Naruto noticed that it went silent. He scratched his head and gave a sigh. He knew that Tsunade might be right. He didn't want to admit it as he felt that since Sasuke had his reputation changed then it could work for Itachi, but Sasuke wasn't on the run for nearly as much time as Itachi. No matter how he looked at it, Konoha would have a difficult time accepting him. They had started to respect him and see him for himself, and it wasn't even because of himself. It was because of his mother and his father's name. He didn't like it, but Naruto accepted it. He didn't dislike that his mother helped to win them over. He loved his mother, in more ways than two. It was just, people were even more suspicious of him than before. Especially since the Asuma incident. Shikamaru had been tense around him, and did he really have to go to Kurenai? No he didn't. Sasuke, we'll think about it later, but right now we haven't got the time to waste. Let's go, Yuna said, and Naruto heard Sasuke give a heavy sigh before Naruto felt him nod. You're right, Yuna. Alright, we're going, Sasuke said, and Tsunade gave an affirmative nod. Naruto cursed and quickly ran to the stairs and began ascending them again to hope that he hadn't been caught. The door opened as Makoto, Yuna and Sasuke saw Naruto appear in front of them. Sasuke and Naruto glanced at each other before the blonde patted the brunette's shoulder and continued to walk. Sasuke gave a small smirk and walked off with Makoto and Yuna. No doubt Naruto wouldn't see them for a while, but he would have to get over that. Naruto opened the door as he saw Tsunade leaning over her desk as she rubbed her temples. No doubt she was still rather pissed off about the whole thing with their decision, but she gave them the reins to do that. She trusted Makoto enough to allow them passage, so it shouldn't have been much of a problem. Ba-chan. Naruto's voice called. Tsunade looked up and sighed. Oh, if it's not one brat then it's another one. What is it, Naruto? Tsunade asked tiredly. Naruto just chuckled nervously and rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, sorry about interrupting, whatever you're doing, but I needed to know something. Is Ero-sennin around? Naruto asked, and Tsunade sighed heavily again. She seemed to be doing that a lot lately, but she figured that it was just the job getting to her like it did for everyone who sat in the damn chair. The perv is out. He still hasn't taken it well to the disrespect that you showed the Toads upon dismissing their contract. It was a contract with your father, but knowing who your summon is, then I think he's trying to come to terms with it, but he's out of the village at the moment. What did you need from him? Tsunade asked, and Naruto chuckled awkwardly. Well, do you remember someone named Yahiko? Naruto asked. Inside the sword, Yahiko was listening intently to what was being said, as were the other summons. Kimimaro and Pakura glanced to each other while Dan was busy acquainting himself with the newest summons. Now that Dan thought about it, maybe it would be better if they could get acquainted. It was obvious that Pakura and Gari knew each other from somewhere, but anyway. I can't recall a name like that, Tsunade said, and Naruto cursed. Shikyo-sama, repeat my words, Yahiko advised. Naruto just inwardly nodded and started to talk with Yahiko as his guide. You and Jiraiya were still a team back then, maybe? It had to do with Aim and Hanzo, Naruto asked. Instantly Tsunade widened her eyes. How could she forget it? She remembered Hanzo like it was a part of every day of her life. He was the person that gave her the title Sannin. Did Naruto meet Hanzo? It certainly wasn't impossible when she thought about it, and if he did, then there was no point in denying it. It also brought her back to something. 3 war orphans. Yeah, that's right. It was when Orochimaru was actually still a good for something person and not a lowlife ass hat. She remembered that now. It took a bit of recalling, but that day was always a burn to her brain. Yeah, I do remember that. 3 brats who tried to steal some food from Jiraiya, myself, and Orochimaru. They were war orphans. I didn't remember their names, but Orochimaru said that we should have killed them because it was better than growing up the way that they did. I had, shamefully, agreed with him, but Jiraiya didn't. It was during the Second Great Shinobi War. There was a team of us, but only we survived against Hanzo and the guy named as Sannin. I remember them, but not their names. Jiraiya said he was going to take care of them until they could handle themselves. He never talked about them. What about it? Well, one of them is Yahiko. He said that he's the leader of Akatsuki, Naruto said, and Tsunade jumped up and slammed her hands on the desk as Naruto backed away slightly. Former leader of Akatsuki. He's one of my summons now. I told him what became of it, and he said that it wasn't meant for such a purpose. He also wants to know what happened to his organization that he spent so much time to create. I told him I'd help him out, but all he could give me were the names of 2 of his friends. One Konan, and the other is Nagato. I don't know much after that, Naruto said, and Tsunade grumbled. Valuable information on Akatsuki, and the perv isn't even here. Damn it all. If we shared this information with Suna, Kumo and Kiri, then we'd have a good enough chance to destroy them fast, Tsunade said as she got an evil grin on her face. Naruto narrowed his eyes and sighed. Yahiko also begged me that I keep his country safe. He says that they should be in a megacure, but he also said that the citizens and people there have not, as far as he knows, done anything to earn our anger. If anything, I think we should really investigate before we make a hasty act like that, Naruto said, and Tsunade touched his forehead. Wow, I didn't know you knew such big words, brat. Kushina must have really paid off. However, I do agree with you on that. AIM is generally a quiet country as they haven't done much that has put them on the radar. But if by chance then the leader of Akatsuki is there, then we're looking one of the best chances to do something about Akatsuki once and for all. Considering that you and B are the last ones left, then it makes sense, Tsunade said, getting a nod from Naruto. He just sighed and turned away, allowing for Tsunade to think about some things. Oh, Naruto, also have Komachi report to the T&I department in 2 days. Don't worry, we won't keep her for very long if she's willing to cooperate, Tsunade said, and Naruto nodded as he quickly closed the door. Tsunade went back to filling some reports, getting a sigh to escape her lips once more. Meanwhile, Naruto walked through the streets and he couldn't help but feel anxious at the stares that were on his form. Naturally, there was enormous talk of Naruto's family and how the Uzumaki clan made itself in Konoha. Most people seemed stunned that Naruto was a clan heir. To them it was amazing. A majority of civilians had been asking questions about whether or not the Uzumaki clan actually existed, and to their surprise it was true. They were a clan and they were aligned to Konoha. Most of the shinobi who had read up on them had discovered the meaning to the swirls on their shinobi attire. It almost immediately made them feel horrible. They had dared to wear the symbol of trust between Uzushiogakure and Konoha while they mistreated Naruto, only one living Uzumaki in their village. They were all just ashamed. That's why Naruto was anxious. People kept bowing to him either in respect or apology. It unsettled Naruto, but he didn't mind it so much. It felt good to actually know that he was getting somewhere with the people, but he could feel somewhere that they were hesitant. He didn't know why, but they were actually making him feel just a little uncomfortable. Ah, Uzumaki-sama, out for a walk. Naruto looked up as he noticed Koharu looking at him with an elderly smile. Naruto just smiled back, but it faltered slightly. He could feel something off with her. He didn't know what it was, but he suddenly had to be very weary of the elder. At the beginning of Naruto's life, she always was an ass. Now, well, he just had no opinion about her. He just smiled back. Yeah, I'm about to go home and give some more training to Yuri-chan. Also go and get some shopping done. Got dinner with the Hyugas next week, Naruto said, and Koharu smiled as she walked past him. She nodded multiple times and Naruto wasn't sure why, but she had a glare on him. Like a prankster waiting for his target to fall into his trap. Naruto knew that look very well. Well, I hope you have a good time. I'm just making a trip to the hospital. Need someone to verify something for me. Went to the morgue, ran a few tests, and made some calculations. Everything should be in order soon, I figure, Koharu said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. In order for what, Ba-chan? Naruto asked, and Koharu snickered. Now Naruto had to be afraid. This woman was known for her seriousness. In the times that Naruto had seen her, she never, and Naruto meant never, laughed or snickered or even giggled. She did none of those things, but that didn't stop her from walking up to him, leaning past his shoulder and whispering. In order to expose the truth about you and have you immediately executed. I have the power to do so. Your clan status does nothing before a traitor, Koharu said as she backed away, leaving Naruto speechless. He narrowed his eyes at her fleeting form as Naruto growled. I'm not a traitor. What the hell is she talking about? Naruto thought to himself. She's always been a slippery bitch. Fuck that bitch Kit. No use in getting all worked up over an old bitch's ramblings. Now then, let's go home so you can get tender with your mother or your cousins. I don't really care. Your little Uza chest is the best thing I've seen in a while, Kyuubi said as Naruto rolled his eyes. Perv, the blonde thought with a grin as he walked off, leaving his conversation with Koharu behind. Meanwhile, the old woman smiled and folded her arms into her sleeves. Yes, be happy, Uzumaki-san. You'll need to get as much of it as you can, for when I get you, oh I will get you, Koharu said to herself. Uzumaki compound. Naruto came through the door and gave a heavy sigh. He looked around the room and nothing had changed upon his leaving. Well, other than the fact that he saw Yuri watching his clone and Fujika's go through some katas. He also saw she reading through some Uzumaki scrolls that he had found from Kushina that she was able to take from Uzushiogakure. It made him so happy that he was learning his family's history. There were tons of paper on the ground which told Naruto that she was learning to apply the seals that he had learned and started to take an active interest to it. Sochi, you're back. That's good, we need to go over our training system, Kushina said, getting Naruto to raise an eyebrow. What training system? For the team? Naruto asked. Kushina shook her head and gently guided Naruto towards the couch. Both sat there while Kushina explained. Not for the team, but for our home. We're officially the Uzumaki clan and she was allowed to be here because of the alliance at the moment. Like it or not, we're not a completely sufficient clan, at least not as much as I remember. The only true seal masters here are myself, you, and Riza. No one else with us knows seals as much as we do. It's too much to ask Riza to teach Shi, Kamachi, Yuri, and Tayuya to do seals appropriately. There is also Karen back at Uzushio. I want to have her here also. I have no doubt that it could work out, but we're transporting too many people as it is. Fuka and Gurren have their hands full with training Yukimaru, but I would like to bring them all to our homeland if at all possible. Our training regime of Uzumaki is to have them knowledgeable about seals just like the past Uzumaki were, Kushina said, getting Naruto to nod. He sighed and leaned against his chair. That's true, isn't it? I haven't checked back with Karen-chan about the way my seal is looking at the moment. I agree with you on that. Not to mention we still haven't done the bingo book as much as we've wanted. Add the money of the Uzumaki compound from Tusan's inheritance and then the money that Hinokan accumulated as a whole, then we're enough for probably a minor village. I would assume, Naruto said, getting Kushina to nod. She looked over some papers and placed them down. We're going to have to work out a schedule so that we have the time to teach them all. Since changing Yukimaru-kun's name to our last name, then he's going to be seen by most of the academy students as a bona fide Uzumaki. Fuka and Gurren have already taught him what they would be willing to, and Yukimaru already knows some things about seals, but he's at least genin in starting, Kushina returned. Alright then, since we're busy most of the time, I can have my clones take care of their studies into Fuinjutsu as they get acquainted with trying to make their own seals and expanding that. She and Kamachi have already begun to get that done and out of the way. She seems to be really into it the most, but I can actually understand why. He seems to really want to learn about either his mother's side or his father's side, Naruto said, and Kushina agreed with him. They could see Shi practicing his strokes over his paper. He wouldn't have to file his report on what Kamachi found for another day or two. Oh, also Ka-chan, Sasuke and Makoto-san are going to be gone, Naruto said while Kushina raised an eyebrow. They're going to look for Itachi along with Yuna, Naruto said. Widening her eyes to that realization, she shook it off with a nod as she got up and dusted her clothes off. Well, that's all good and fine. They can do that if they want to. I'm not going to stop them. I'd be a little reserved if Sasuke went by himself, but they'll be better off if Makoto is with them, Kushina said and clapped her hands. Now then, Yuri, Fuka, Gurren, Tayuya, Riza and I have to find things to wear for the Hyuga dinner. We'll find something for Kamachi when she's finished with her things. Sochi, make sure that you and she find something to wear also, Kushina said and waved goodbye as Naruto watched the females gather and quickly leave. Kamachi blinked while Naruto and she remained silent. The only other person was Fujika's and he seemed to be doing exercises out in the backyard. So, what do you guys want to do? Naruto asked. Kamachi and she turned to him and then glanced towards each other. Kamachi saw Shi give a smile while he shrugged his shoulders. I'm going to take a break from studying. I think I'll get some practice in, she said and Naruto snorted. Yeah, you do need the practice. Kami knows I could learn something faster than you, Naruto said and she stopped. He turned back to Naruto and shook his head. I'm not falling for that one, she said and Naruto turned to Kamachi. She remained silent and she watched Naruto blink. He wasn't sure, but he thought he saw a blush as Kamachi averted her eyes suddenly. Well, he could forget about it. As for right now, yeah right, I'm way faster than you, both at learning jutsu and running. Wanna go at it? Naruto asked and she grinned. He chuckled as he cracked his knuckles. I have never lost a bet in the few times I've been challenged. You don't wanna start something you can't finish, she said and Naruto chuckled. Oh sure, you say that now. Winner does one request for the loser, Naruto said and she nodded. You're on, he said as the blonde opened the door. He looked out from his house and snickered. Hokage stone faces and back. Kamachi-chan will decide the winner. Set, go, Naruto yelled as he sped out the house. She gasped as he quickly placed on his running sandals. Cheater. I didn't know my family was a bunch of cowards. she shouted as he slammed the door shut. Komachi sighed as she wondered how she had been dragged into something like that. She heard laughing and looked over to see Fujika's coming through the door. To be alive is a wonderful thing. Your family is very unshu, Komachi-sama, Fujika said. Komachi looked at the door and slowly agreed with a nod of her head. She then went back to his words and shook her head. Why call me with such respect? That I know of. I've done nothing in my life worth the respect of any peers, Komachi said, and Fujika's patted her on the shoulder. Naruto-sama forgives you of things you've done. If he has, then there is no need for me to bear a grudge to someone that I don't need to. You are a fine woman, Komachi-sama, Fujika said before he walked up the stairs to his room, leaving Komachi alone. She suddenly smiled as she waited, looking at the door. 1 hour later, Naruto and she bursted through as they both lightly panted. Who won, Komachi-chan? Naruto asked as he and she looked at her expectingly. Komachi's sweat dropped as she wondered what it was about family like this, but it made her warm inside. She wondered if this was how it would be if she had siblings. She opened her mouth and spoke. Shi-san. Komachi asked and she grinned while Naruto fell to the ground. Ha! You cheated and I still won. Hand over my prize, she said, and Naruto grumbled as he reached into his pouch and pulled out a scroll for expert sealing. The blonde snorted and looked away. You just got lucky, Naruto said, and she nodded. I know. I just have it better than you do, she said, getting a growl from Naruto. However, he inwardly chuckled at this. This was how a family was supposed to be, or at least a part of it. With the ladies. All were in a clothing store while the cashier chuckled nervously. The only reason she was doing so was because of the entire female Uzumaki population in her store. It had been a great day in her life, but that didn't say that they didn't intimidate her. She just stayed still and waited for them to go with what they wanted. How does this look? She heard someone say and noticed that it was Yuri holding up a bra. Yuri, you can't wear that to the dinner. Are you insane? Yura asked. Fuka and Guren snickered while Yuri scowled. Riza and Tayuya snorted while Kushina chuckled. It's not for them. I'm not that stupid, Datbayan. It's for Ni-chan, Yuri said as Yura sputtered. Kushina's eyebrow twitched and Fuka tried to hold back a laugh. Wow, I think you've been spending too much time around Fuka, Kushina said, and Fuka pouted. I take offense to that, she said, but she couldn't forget her laughter, so she just settled for snickering. You're trying to shag the shithead. That ain't right. Or all of you shits this weird? Tayuya asked before she was slapped over the head again by her mother. Damn it, Tayuya, I told you about language. Riza growled and Tayuya glared at her mother before rubbing her sore head. Ah, who cares what you think? I'd rather be weird. Normal is overrated, Yuri said while Fuka nodded. Guren sighed as she looked for a dress. She wasn't too keen on that type of stuff. She was an honest-to-goodness shinobi and she never saw herself wearing elegant shit. The same could be said for Tayuya, but whether she liked it or not, her mother would get her into one, and Tayuya doubted that she could resist. Her curse mark was sealed, and along with it, half of her strength. She wouldn't be doing much. That's right, Yuri, you do what you want. But if you really want to make him tremble, then there is an effective way to do that, Fuka said as Yuri nodded hastily. No, don't corrupt my sister any more than she already is. Can we just get our clothes and then get out of here? Yura struggled in asking. Kushina, you seem rather fine with this talk about your son. I would think you'd beat them over with a stick about your innocent Naru-chan, Riza said. Fuka smirked and so did Guren. Or is my cousin getting a little, precious son love? Riza asked as Tayuya coughed. Fuka blushed and patted Kushina's back while the redhead at least had the decency to blush at those implications. Yura and Yuri already knew the truth. What the fuck is wrong with you people? Tayuya shouted while Kushina coughed. Nothing is wrong. We're just keeping it in the family is all, Yuri said, and Tayuya snorted. She shook her head left and right and sighed heavily. This wasn't even her problem at the moment. So have we all figured out what we're wearing? Riza asked and everyone nodded in agreement. As they exited the store, they grabbed Kushina and all leaned in. So how is he? Tayuya asked. They all looked at Kushina and grinned. Kushina could see Yura and Yuri's hungry eyes and shook her head. Serious, this family was dysfunctional at best. I thought you said that it was weird. Kushina asked and Tayuya waved it off. Fuck that shit for right now. Just how is the shit? Tayuya asked and Kushina blushed. She sighed, but she couldn't stop the twinkle in her eyes as she walked past them and out into the street. I don't kiss and tell Databane. I'll just say, once you go Uzumaki you never go back, Kushina said as she walked off. Yura and Yuri blushed madly while Fuka licked her lips. Tayuya stuttered and Gurren had the decency to chuckle at least. Riza thought to herself as Tayuya glared at her mother. Well anyway, that's enough of that. Come on, we have to go get things done. We have quite the next few days ahead of us, Kushina said getting the girls to nod. Kumogakure, Samui's house. Bullshit. Karui shouted at the top of her voice. Atsui and Omoi glanced to each other while Samui sighed and massaged her neckline. They were all watching Karui have one of her fits at how impossible any of it was. No one could get a word in anywhere as the redhead did her best to calm down. She panted. Seeing her burn her energy, Samui finally opened her mouth. Karui, be cool. It's not as impossible as you make it out to be. It's the only way to explain these swirls that just appeared on all of us, Samui said while Karui growled. You're telling me that all of us are somehow related to him just because she was. How in the hell is she even related to the guy? Karui asked. Samui shrugged her shoulders while Omoi scratched his cheek. Well, it was a big deal around Kumo when Shisan decided to update his shinobi license. He never had a last name so it wasn't as big a deal, but everyone was surprised when his last name came up, Uzumaki. Samui told me before she called us together that Naruto-san told Shisan, all those who have this swirl on their body means that they have Uzumaki blood, no matter how small, Omoi said and Karui stayed silent. Samui nodded while Atsui folded his arms. So that means that we're all related then? Atsui asked. Karui stiffened while Omoi stayed silent. Samui shrugged and no one knew where to go from there. The uncomfortable silence went over the entire room before Karui decided to talk. Okay, let's say that we even were a part of this clan, then what would we do? He doesn't expect us to just leave Kumo and join his clan, does he? Karui asked. Atsui chuckled and everyone turned to him. I doubt he would want that. I could tell from watching him fight. He's not that kind of guy. He's definitely got a hot soul inside him, Atsui confirmed. Omoi nodded with a chuckle and Samui suddenly stopped folding her arms. While I am not sure what to think, I still believe that if we have even a remote chance of learning about our families then we should take it. We were all orphans after all. The same as Shisan. We were put into the orphan relief program by Reikage-sama. You can't tell me that you're not the least bit interested in him. He did manage to beat all three of us, you know, she reminded. It was a reminder that Karui didn't like at all. Yeah, we remember that. It's not like it was long ago after all. What are you saying? Omoi asked and Samui looked down. When we saw him fight B-sensei, didn't we all feel the same thing? When we thought he was gone? Samui asked. The others nodded. They had felt that intense burning as well as an overwhelming sense of sadness and underlying contempt. Contempt for what? They weren't sure, but seeing Naruto nearly die in front of them had done something to them. Maybe it opened up a hidden desire or personal feeling. What about it? Karui asked. Atsui rolled his eyes and stood to his feet. Like you didn't feel the sudden urge that you truly cared for him. When his team went down there, you wanted to go with them. How you wanted to yell at B-sensei for what he did and you even felt an immense happiness when he raised up that nothing else mattered. I felt that, Atsui said and Omoi nodded. I did too. It was so hot that I thought it was going to burn my skin off, causing me to lose one of my arms, which wouldn't allow me to return to shinobi duty, become poor, and then die alone, Omoi said while Karui seemed too tired to reprimand him for what he had said. She just massaged her temples while looking at the ground. So what do we do? Karui asked. Samui looked out the window and into the village to see the people walking around. For now, we'll come to a decision. We'll think things over for 2 days. If we all agree then we go to the hospital. We'll take a blood test if Atsui and I are related to you guys and the same thing over. If they come back and well we're with him then we will announce it to him. If not we all go about our business and he goes about his, Samui said. Omoi nodded, Atsui nodded, but Karui growled. And what if we are related to him, huh? Then what? Have you ever thought about the risks to this? Who knows if he's even going to accept us after the things we said to him, Karui said and Omoi snorted. Don't you mean the things you said to him? Omoi corrected and Karui slapped him over the head. Then we'll apologize, but it's not cool to reject family just because you're afraid of results. I'm going, Samui said as she made her decision. Don't need 2 days to think about it. The dude's hot and I look forward to knowing him, Atsui said with a thumbs up. Well, we have nothing to lose, I guess. I've been nearly alone all my life until I had you guys for a genin team. I want to do it, Omoi said, and they noticed Karui walk out of the door. They all sighed and shook their heads. 2 days, if she doesn't go for it then she won't. We'll do it and we'll accept what we see. We'll also ask for some blood from Shi-san and Naruto-san to verify, Samui said. Omoi and Atsui nodded as Omoi left after Karui. Atsui turned to his sister to see her frowning. What's wrong? He asked, and Samui shook her head. It's nothing, she lied as she walked to her room. Atsui raised an eyebrow to her leaving, but shrugged it off. All the while, Samui had a lingering thought. Is it just a coincidence that we were placed on the same team with a small chance of us being related to Uzumaki-san? Samui closed the door to her room, leaving her thoughts to herself for her to think over. 2 days later, Uzushiogakure. Suigetsu and Zabuza were sparring in the back of the houses, and while Suigetsu complained to the former missing nin about all the damn time, he was still an acceptable training partner in Zabuza's eyes. Zabuza knew that he could very well leave if he wanted to, but Haku wasn't about to abandon the one who gave both her and her surrogate father their life back. She held an attachment and vowed to use her abilities for what Naruto wanted. In the days that she had been gone, Haku and Rin had been doing self-study and healing as Rin taught Haku all the things that she had known about medical jutsu, and while she wasn't nearly as great as Tsunade, Rin still had a few expertise in the subject of health. Maybe it was a coincidence that there was plenty of medicinal herbs, flowers, and books on the subject in Uzushio that she was able to read up on. Also, Haku had taken to training with weights on. Her lost Obito had taught her just how much stronger she had to get if she wanted to protect those important to her. She had great speed, but it wasn't the best and she had to improve it. So Zabuza had offered Haku her weights that he had decided to buy for her. Haku had used them everywhere that she could, but Karen had found a better method in the scrolls about gravity seals. They were also applied by her and Haku could adjust to the thing that she wanted. Jugo had really trained as much as the others, but he did work out when he wanted to. No, he spent most of his time with the animals that lived in the forest. He would also wander off when he would go on one of his rampages. Karen had tried to decipher Naruto's seal that he had given her to examine for him. She had tried to find anything abnormal with it, and that was the problem. The whole thing was abnormal. She had never seen one like it in her life. One part of it didn't even look like a seal. Karen had seen many seals in her life, but this was the very first intricate sealing that even she couldn't decipher. It was definitely the tetragram seal of the Yondaime, but the parts that it mixed into with other seals had made it like an unlocking seal of some sort. She didn't know what to think. However, what Karen had to do was put on hold as she heard the main door open. Karen, deciding on a break, hopped up and came out of the study. Sasuke, Karen said, surprised as Sasuke, Makoto, and Yuna came through the door. Karen, grab Jugo and Suigetsu. We're moving out, Sasuke said, and Karen just nodded her head. In less than a few minutes, Jugo and Suigetsu appeared before the Uchiha as the latter folded his arms. I almost thought you had forgotten about us for a second, Suigetsu said, getting a snort from the Uchiha. HN, Sasuke grunted, getting Suigetsu more than a little irritated, but he would have to hold off on anything seeing as how Sasuke was more than capable of making him suffer, as was Yuna. Can we just forget your crap for a second? We're leaving soon and we need you guys. So hurry up and get moving, Yuna told them. I don't take orders from you, Suigetsu and Karen said in unison. Yuna chuckled darkly as her eyes warped into the Mangekyo Sharingan. Oh, I have no problem turning all of you into dust as I see fit, Karen said, getting them to gulp. Jugo only nodded and quickly made his way out the door. Are the others with you? Haku asked, getting a shake of the head from Sasuke. They are back in Konoha and will remain there for a little while. The only reason we got here so fast is because Naruto had helped us out and brought us here. We don't have the time to waste, Sasuke responded. But I have things to look into for Naruto. He asked me to look over this seal while he was gone, Karen said. She didn't know why she was making it so necessarily known to Sasuke, but she had promised to look into it and Karen never broke promises. It was against her ethics. Then again, when you work with Orochimaru then you rarely have morals or ethics. Just bring it with you. You should be able to do that much. Let's go people. Yuno ordered. Suigetsu sighed as he grabbed a spar blade that Zabuza had on him. It really wasn't in his best to want one like this, but facing the demon of the mist wasn't at the top of his list at the moment. So, Karen took all the supplies that she would need to get Naruto's request out of the way during the journey. Suigetsu strapped his sword to his waist and Rin quickly handed Jugo some new clothes. He bowed as Makoto opened the door. Okay, we're going off you three. Don't wait up, Makoto said as they quickly rushed off towards the shoreline for their boat. Rin leaned on the couch while Haku and Zabuza just seemed confused. They all glanced to each other and Rin sighed. I guess I'll be going down into the workshop then. See you guys later, Rin said while Haku turned her head to see the older female leaving. You've been going down there for a good 2 or 3 weeks now. What are you doing down there? Haku asked and Rin smiled as she shook her head back and forth. Not tellin' ya. Oh, but has my supply order come in? Rin asked and Zabuza nodded with a suspicious glare. One that Rin noticed, but she waved it off. She did indeed seem suspicious in their eyes, but she wouldn't do anything to put them in danger. 1. She didn't have the motive for it and 2. She didn't have the skills for it. Despite being older, Rin was not nearly as good as Zabuza and she knew that. She did have Kakashi to help her, but there was only so much they could cover for her at the moment. Right now she was just Tokubetsu Jonin level, but a few more weeks or a month of special training and she would be able to handle herself if need be. Yeah, the supply order came in. It's near your room, Zabuza answered. Rin nodded and excused herself with a gentle hum of her voice. What do you think she's up to? Haku asked and Zabuza snorted. Who knows? But we'll keep an eye on her. I doubt she'll do anything harmful though, Zabuza said getting Haku to nod. Now then, let's continue your training, Zabuza commanded. Haku agreed as she got up. She assumed her best stance while Zabuza waved his guillotine sword over his head. Haku was going to be in for a world of pain. Uzumaki compound. Alright, I'm taking Kamachi-chan, Naruto told them. Everyone nodded as Yura and Yuri wished Kamachi her luck. She just placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. Kamachi, not used to these things, just went with it and tried to give a smile, but one refused to come out. Naruto had seen it and knew that this was still programming from Danzo. His influence was heavy and until Naruto could get that damn Juinjutsu off Kamachi's tongue, she wouldn't be talking about anything remotely related to Danzo, which was why Naruto was happy she wasn't being interrogated by Ibiki or Anko. Her memory was just going through collection by Ino's father, Inoichi. See you soon Kamachi, Riza said and Kamachi blinked at the familiarity, but shook it off. Thank you, she said as she and Naruto walked out of the house and into the streets. Kamachi followed right behind him and couldn't help but find herself looking at the village. The kids running around and laughing, the adults talking with each other and the stores bustling. If Kamachi were honest then she would say that she never held much of an attachment to Konoha. All her life, or from what she could remember, the people had never really paid her much mind. Her mental training had actually made her loyal to Danzo and not Konoha, directly. The only thing that made her protect the place was Danzo, and now it was the Uzumaki clan. She didn't know what she could do for her family, but she would try anything. She had read some of the books that she did and found seals to be an interesting subject. She had placed a few on her body and collected lots of storage scrolls for experimentation. She hoped that her family would be willing to help with a project that she wanted to have done. Kamachi looked up and instantly saw Naruto's back. This blonde was a mystery to her. Somehow she might as well have been a related cousin or something like that. She never really explained it well for her taste, but she felt warm near him and not cold like she usually felt. Each time he would leave she would feel just a little bit colder than when he was there. It was a strange feeling to her. She was eternally grateful to him for helping to save her life, but what was she supposed to say about this? It wasn't like she had the best knowledge on the subject. She at least knew that she was en route, at one point. She remembered the training that they had to undergo to shape their emotionless personalities, but little by little that left and she wasn't sure why. She just found him to be strange. He was like a very well-kept seal, one that she would really like to crack if given the time. We're here, Naruto said and Kamachi shook her head from the thinking she was doing. She looked up and indeed she had been thinking through the entire walk as she didn't remember walking so far that she was inside her thoughts. Naruto patted her shoulder as he and Komachi walked through the gates. In front of the building were Tsunade and Ibiki. They had been waiting for Naruto to come with their patient and both were pleased that she had indeed done so and not tried to run away. Not like Naruto would have let her if she tried. "Nice of you to join us, brat," Tsunade said while Naruto snorted. "It's not like you would have given us a choice. I'd much rather have Komachi-chan compliant than having you try to kill her," Naruto said. Komachi frowned at the intended threat, but said nothing. That was common for reluctant prisoners. "I suppose you have a point. Well, Ibiki, take her," Tsunade said, and Ibiki walked up to Komachi, his somewhat tall figure making her lean her head back slightly. "Follow me," he said, and Komachi did so. Tsunade followed behind him and Naruto began to walk, but the Godime stopped him. "I'm gonna have to have you wait here, brat," Tsunade said suddenly. "What? Why?" Naruto growled out angrily. Tsunade groaned and placed her hands on her waist. "This is standard procedure so that she's not distracted by anything. Just wait here for about 4 hours, Tsunade said, and Naruto's eyes bulged out of his sockets. 4 hours? Why the hell is it so long? Naruto asked, and Tsunade rolled her eyes. "It's our damn job, okay? You can train if you want, but you must do it carefully. Just use the backyard," Tsunade said as she walked through the doors and disappeared behind a hall. Naruto narrowed his eyes at this as he hadn't been informed. He also didn't feel like going into all that with her again. Relationship or not, Tsunade was the Hokage and Naruto did have to obey her orders. Now that he thought about it, the Senju and the Uzumaki were related also. Did Tsunade have a mark also? He hadn't seen one. Of course Tsunade might have been, quarter Uzumaki or something like that. Naruto didn't know. Maybe he would ask later or something like that. Well, at least he could train while he waited. So, Naruto headed to the very spacious backyard and decided to do some standard stretches. "You're going to practice that technique, aren't you?" Kyuubi asked. "Yeah, I've put it off long enough to deal with the Uzumaki training regime and I want to quickly get it. It should just be standard shape manipulation, but we couldn't get it on Teiko Asen because we rushed it. I have to say sorry for that one. It wasn't fair to you," Naruto said, getting Kurama to snort. "Meh, I've fucking had worse. At least you're a better use for it than Mito," Kurama said, and Naruto chuckled. "Well, I'm glad, I guess," Naruto said to him. He finished his crunches and then got settled on his push-ups. It was going to be a standard exercise routine. "Now that I ask this, how does it feel? The Honsho power, I mean. Last I saw 3 of your tails were white," Naruto said, getting Kyuubi to thrash his tails around. He looked at them and snorted while he laid them down. "And they're still like that?" "No, more than that, my 4th tail is half white and half orange." "I feel ridiculous," Kyuubi said, and Naruto laughed. "That's the goodness taking over you," Naruto said, and he heard Kyuubi fake gag. "Ah, choking on affection. Gonna fucking die," Kyuubi said while Naruto sweat dropped. He sighed and shook his head left and right. "Oh, whatever, Fox. Let's just get this over with. Now then," Naruto said as he closed his eyes. Kyuubi did the same and both could feel their connection rise as 5 tails came from Naruto's back. He looked them over and smiled. He didn't marvel at them long as he wanted to get his work done. So, he held out his hand and muttered, "Jikuyugami," he said. Instantly the portal appeared in front of him and Naruto nodded. "Remind me of the ratio again, Kyuubi," Naruto requested from his tenant. "Ratio is 10:6, brat. Nothing more, nothing less. We have a good majority of time left," Kyuubi said, getting Naruto to nod. The tails went up and arched over the portal. Naruto held out his hands. He grunted while the portal compressed in size. It slowly began to morph into a ball shape that Naruto could hold in his hands. He growled, and when he got it to an appropriate size he turned around. "Shunkanyugami," Naruto shouted as he launched the ball forward. It didn't even get 2 feet in front of him before it dispersed into nothingness. Naruto blinked while Kyuubi narrowed his eyes. Both sighed, but Naruto wasn't one to give up. He quickly made a roughly 5 groups of clones. "Listen up, we're all going to use the same method that we used for the Rasenshuriken only for this new technique. Keep it until you have it to an appropriate size. Fire it only to the places where you can. You'll know the effect when you see it, Naruto told them all. All the clones nodded to him and they quickly stood in their groups, and Naruto could see dozens of them pull out Kyuubi's tails as they began to work. Meanwhile, Naruto took out a scroll on shape manipulation. He leaned against a tree and continued on since the clones were doing the experimenting part of the process. The blonde read along its lines, and of course he knew about shape manipulation, but this was an Anbu-style exercise of shape manipulation. It involved pressing chakra to a large structure and, with that chakra, spreading it out and forcing it to take the shape that it wanted. The reason that it was an Anbu exercise was because of the sheer size of the structure that it had to be, but even the Anbu never really took their shape manipulation that far. That's because there wasn't a need to. They had to have good shape manipulation and other shinobi skills to even be a part of the Anbu. No, this exercise was for those like Naruto who really wanted to take it to a level. Of course Naruto figured that what he was trying to do should have been simple enough, since what he was trying to do went in with his technique was just like his Rasengan training. Maybe it was a problem with his Honsho or how he used it. However, that shouldn't have been much of a problem as he had seen it. Maybe because his was more potent than it needed something else. Naruto was sure that he had all the seals, to even make this possible, were in place and didn't need fixing. So what was it? Naruto was going to have a lot of thinking to do. Not that he knew it also, but Kyuubi was also thinking hard on the matter also. It was as he wanted, well, sort of. His container wasn't weak, but he still needed his help. Well, they were on a semi-first name basis, so maybe he could still offer his help. Naruto, let me have control for a moment, Kyuubi said suddenly. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this request as he wondered what he was thinking. What are you thinking? Naruto asked. Kyuubi narrowed his eyes at the words that he was reading from Naruto's scroll. He silently nodded to himself and straightened up. I'm thinking that I might just be able to think of a way of what you're doing, Kyuubi said. Naruto nodded and closed his eyes. If worse came to worse, then he could just repel Kyuubi with his chains. It wasn't that he didn't trust his recent partner, but he wanted to be more safe than sorry. As he opened them, Naruto's blue eyes were going and replaced with slit, red eyes, showing Kyuubi in control of his conscious. With Tara and Taji. Tara and Taji hovered over a small building in Konoha as they glanced to each other. Both floated down as Tara touched the wall. I remember that there used to be a way to get in here. It's been so long, Tara said as emotionless as he was programmed to. Taji sighed and shook her head. Or, we could, and I know this is a long shot, do this, Taji said as she passed through the wall. Tara blinked while Taji popped her head out of the side of said wall. We're spirits. We have no use for doors, she said as she quickly vanished behind the wall. Tara snorted as he floated through also. Both looked through the base and were surprised to see that a majority of the base was destroyed. They had discovered the base that Hinoken had first discovered from Danzo. It was amazing to them that the arches and beams were still standing, but there was hardly any ground as most of it was destroyed. Taji looked left and right while Tara passed through the ground. Where are you going? Taji shouted while Tara peeled his head from the floor. Danzo-san had an office below these levels. I don't know if it was crushed or not, but if he's a missing nin then he would have taken his things. There are still other bases for us to check, Tara told her. Taji seemingly nodded in agreement as she floated through the floor also. Both went down 4 feet of pure earth and rubble. Tara came to the ground as he landed. Now normally, it was against death's law for spirits to attempt to manifest their bodies as they were, well, dead. They could manifest anything, but this was a purpose to serve their shikyo, so the shinigami was probably looking the other way this time. Tara looking around the room, or what was left of it. It was as he expected, the room was vacant and nothing was around. Books were unreadable from gravel and rock. Missing pages filled with needless reports. Tara had taken a look at these reports and found some meetings with the woman Akiko. Not to mention a private dip into the Konoha Treasury Department, but it wasn't something that would be noticed. This was Danzo they were talking about. Do you find anything? Taji asked, coming through the ceiling. Tara shook his head as he continued to look through the reports, but nothing had indicated about where he would have gone. Nothing of importance. We'll have to find someplace else. He has plenty of bases to go on from. You know that, right? Tara asked, and Taji tried her best not to scoff. She folded her arms while she began to float. Of course I know. I was one of Danzo's best agents. Try not to think so little of me, Taji said as she quickly passed through the ceiling. Tara narrowed his eyes behind his mask before shaking his head. He resisted the urge to give a sigh and followed out after her. It was only as he did he notice something shining. Tara floated back down, moved some rubble, and quickly picked up a scroll with a shiny emblem on it. Are you coming? Taji asked, poking her head out. Tara didn't answer as he unfurled the scroll. His eyes went down its contents and he quickly closed the scroll. He knew where Danzo was. It was one of the most remote locations that he could ever be in. It was a designed backup for them in case of ever being found out like this. It was tough to make out in very little light, and add to the fact that it was nearly crushed, then it wouldn't be very readable to those who didn't know its value. Yeah, come on. I know where our next location is, Tara said while Taji raised an eyebrow. Tara placed the scroll away back into the earth and floated out of the debris with Taji following him. She really had no idea where they were going next, as Danzo had so many bases that if it were more accurate then one could say that he had one in all of the villages, but that would be just a little inaccurate. Hideout. Tawa dropped to the ground and glared up in his mask towards Danzo, who was filing some reports. He glanced up towards his root Anbu and waited for Tawa to give his reports. He didn't need to say for him to give them. It was just a part of the young man's training that he was able to recognize such things. Normally it wasn't supposed to be a big issue of who would actually give him the reports, but since he was in somewhat of a tight spot, then it was natural to have assumptions like that. Akiko-sama has arrived and has asked to meet with you, Danzo-sama, Tawa said, and Danzo just seemingly glared at him for whatever purpose. After a little bit of silence, Danzo struck his cane to the ground and nodded. Very well. Send her in, Danzo said to him. Tawa nodded quickly and opened the door. Danzo saw Akiko come through the door with the same smug expression on her face as usual. She smiled at Tawa while he closed the door. Tawa was ready to excuse himself, but Akiko stopped him. I would like for Tawa to remain here, she said with a grin. Tawa looked back to Danzo and the man seemed to be making calculations in his head before nodding. I have reports that you're wanted for treason to your village. Looks like you're out of luck, Danzo said to her. Akiko chuckled and proceeded to walk to the table. She took a seat as she touched a shugi piece. Oh, where is the fun, you old warhawk? You're in the same boat as me. After all, it's mostly your fault that I'm out of the village, or did you forget about your shinobi's incompetence in getting herself captured? Akiko asked. Danzo snorted at the reminder of Komachi. He turned to Tawa and noticed him unmoving as always. He was glad to see that the loss of Komachi wasn't affecting him at all. These things happened and getting past them was enough. I have already taken care of my problem. Do not blame me or root for your own incompetence. It is because of your actions that a few of my plans have been put on hold. We're just fortunate that a connection I have was able to bring me some information. All they asked for was some medical records, Danzo said as he moved a piece forward. Is that right? Yes, I have heard that you effectively wiped her memory, and I have no doubt of your shinobi, but how effective is it? Now I've taken it upon myself to correct both of our mistakes, Akiko said as she moved a piece also. Danzo didn't show any intention of falling for her words, but he was thinking them over. Is that so? And how, may I ask, have you come about this problem? Danzo asked, moving another piece. The game went going on for a while and Akiko never said anything. Either she was too into the game or she knew something that Danzo didn't, and that last one was highly unlikely. Say, Danzo, how old are you? Akiko asked. Danzo's hand didn't stall on the piece of his next turn as he took one of Akiko's piece and she took another. Both kept doing this and it was clear to Akiko that she wasn't going to get an answer out of him, so she moved on. You're not getting any younger. Have you named a successor for Root yet? She asked. Again Danzo didn't answer as they continued to play their game. It was almost finished as Akiko smiled. Well, you can ignore me all you want, but we both know the facts. The world is changing, Danzo, and if you don't change with it then you will be left behind, in the dust of the old times. A place where the strong rule the weak and the unprepared, she said as she pushed a piece forward. Danzo did the same, but he did acknowledge her words. Is that so? He asked and Akiko nodded. That's right. One must be prepared for anything. Even traitors. Your use to me is over, Danzo. If I stand nothing to gain from our partnership, well, I can't lie about that. Your root should actually do quite nicely. Tawa, Dispose of Danzo immediately, Akiko said, and Tawa stood still. He looked at them both before he drew his tanto. He walked forward and Danzo sat emotionless. Akiko had a wide grin on her face before she felt the cold steel to her throat. What? Tawa, listen to me. Akiko shouted while Danzo quickly took her piece. You were born of a civilian family. You know nothing of true shinobi tactics. I would never allow myself to be left open so easily. It is I who has no more use for you. Do not worry, for I will look after all your investments, Danzo said as he nodded to Tawa. Akiko looked in fear before a quick swipe of Tawa's blade slitted her throat. Akiko gasped and fell to the floor lifeless in a pool of blood while Tawa swiped the remaining blood from his sword. Checkmate, Danzo said as the king took the last of Akiko's pieces. Tawa sheathed his weapon while Danzo stood to his feet. You have something that you want to say? Danzo asked, and Tawa blinked before indeed opening his mouth. Danzo-sama, I will never betray you nor go against your orders, but why have you felt the need to keep Komachi alive? She is still a possible threat and all of Kumo is currently looking for Akiko-san. What is your current plan of action? Tawa asked, and Danzo could see that the young man was flustered, or at the very least confused by what the objective was. It sort of elated Danzo that he was able to still keep his agendas hidden from even his own men. He wasn't sure why. I won't spare you all of the details as you needn't know too much. I would just say that it will involve all of the villages together. I never put all of my trust into anything and anything that I do. Also, let's just say that I will be needing Madara to be a little faster with his work. I can't afford to hold back my schedule forever. I have no doubt that Akatsuki only need the Kyuubi and Hachibi in order to fill its resolve. I won't let them get that far ahead. As for Komachi, she is no longer Root's concern. As long as my Juinjutsu is on her, then she won't compromise us, Danzo said to Tawa. The young Root member nodded and opened the door. Also find one of you to keep this up, Danzo ordered. Tawa nodded and quickly left while Danzo sat down. He looked at the dead Akiko at his feet and shook his head. Such is the life of those who live in the shinobi world. Their fate lies only in death, Danzo said as he continued to write his reports. Back with Naruto. Kyuubi's influence faded as Naruto's eyes returned to their original blue color. He had been in control for more than 2 or 3 hours. Naruto had lost count after that, but he was pleased to know that Kyuubi didn't take advantage of this new trust that Naruto had for him and do something stupid. On the contrary, he actually helped. Kyuubi had tried pushing parts of his yoki through Naruto's seals in order to make the shape manipulation more fluid for him. If Kyuubi thought about it right then, the reason that Naruto was having trouble forming it, then it was because Naruto had drawn the seals on his arms that allowed Honsho to be broken down and then repaired instantly to allow for the distortion of space that the blonde wanted and that might have been interfering with the shape manipulation. Kyuubi had sort of made a modification out of the seal that allowed the Honsho to be reconstructed, but also to maintain its previous state, which, in theory, should allow Naruto to utilize his shape manipulation easier. Alright, go for it, brat, Kyuubi said, and Naruto nodded. He dismissed his clones and groaned as he rubbed his head from a slight headache from the mass effect of the clones and what they had on his mind. Lots of swearing, frustration, and hard work. It made Naruto sigh to himself, but he followed Kyuubi's instructions and held out his hand. Wait! Kyuubi suddenly yelled and Naruto stalled. What is it? Naruto asked and Kyuubi breathed a sigh of relief. Where you make it the correct shape or not, it's going to be useless if it takes too long for you to make it. So let's try making it into the shape while forming it at the same time, Kyuubi advised. Naruto thought his words over and shortly agreed thereafter. Alright then. Let's try it that way, Naruto said as he brought his tails into the air. He lowered his hands to his abdomen and quickly gathered the Honsho around, making it swirl left and right. The blonde growled against the strain as the tails kept the balance of control that Naruto needed. He didn't need all 9, just 5 was enough. The Honsho quickly turned purple and Naruto could hear the sounds of scraping and grinding. It assaulted his ears, but the blonde didn't stop. He could feel the warmth on his hands. He calmed his breathing and closed his eyes. Suddenly, the grinding stopped. He opened his eyes and in Naruto's hands was a 2-hand-held purple circular object. He raised an eyebrow. This was definitely what he wanted to make, and if Kyuubi didn't do something then this wouldn't have been possible. Well, fire it already, Kyuubi said. Nervously and excitedly, Naruto agreed as he chose a forest away to fire it towards. He breathed and at the top of his lungs shouted, "Shinigami no Jutsu." Naruto shot the ball forward as he watched it tear through the forest. It kept going and going until it ultimately dispersed. Naruto and Kyuubi seemed surprised. It tore through everything. Some of the trees had holes in them, the ground was torn apart, rocks were torn through. It was like pieces of them just got obliterated. Naruto looked at his hands and could see small burn marks over them which Kyuubi was already healing. "Oh, we gotta try that again. Shunkin." Naruto stopped and growled as he grabbed his right arm. He cursed as he fell to the ground and panted heavily. The sweat fell from his face as Naruto felt the small measure of pain leave his body as the burning of the seals calmed down. He sighed and looked at his arm. What was that? Naruto thought to himself. "Hey brat." Naruto heard his name called, or what it was he figured, and turned his head around to see Tsunade along with Ibiki and Inoichi. Was it really 4 hours? Naruto thought before walking over and collecting himself. As he walked over, Tsunade took the time to look at the training field, or lack thereof. She sighed as she wondered if Naruto ever had a word in his dictionary called limit. He probably didn't, but Tsunade did say that he could train, if he wanted, while he waited for Komachi. So she had to expect these things. His father would be impressed. "So it's over?" Naruto asked and Tsunade nodded. A part of the deal was to give Naruto a full report on what had happened. "Yes brat, it's over. Komachi is currently waiting for you in the lobby. She told us everything that she knew without it completely relating to Danzo." Also Inoichi looked into her memories and Tsunade trailed off, getting Naruto to glare at all of them. "Yeah, and?" Naruto asked impatiently. Tsunade remained a little silent as did Ibiki, so Inoichi decided to take control of the situation and tell Naruto himself. "And we have learned of at least 10 different bases that are owned by Danzo throughout the elemental nations. While we couldn't even get much from her about Danzo, we were still able to retrieve information for Kumo, and what I have discovered was surprising. Because Danzo messed with her memories, then Komachi wasn't able to show me accurate things, but I was able to discern most of them. Apparently Akiko has been in contact with Danzo for longer than a good 20 years or so. They had their connection back during the times that Root was first organized. Komachi was charged with delivering a maintenance report on the dealings of their supporters, but she got captured before it could happen. I skipped past the Kumo interrogation method because it seemed unnecessary." Inoichi paused to get a short breath and continued. "Anyway, it seems that losing most of her memories has not affected Komachi-san's personality. She will be fine in continuing as she does, provided that someone keeps an eye on her. Apparently, in Komachi's memories, there are dealings of Danzo with Akatsuki. There isn't enough of a proof in her to justify that though. However, we can at least give Kumo their side and honor our agreement. Komachi knew most of the locations having to deal with Akiko, and we can report that to Shi-san." Inoichi finished and Naruto nodded. "I've already written down everything. You just need to hand it to him," Tsunade said, cutting it. She handed Naruto a scroll with the seal of the Hokage over it, and the blonde collected it. He quickly nodded and then looked at the ground. Makoto would want to know about that as well, but he didn't know where she was at the time, so it wouldn't have done good for him to try. She already had a current objective. "Alright then Ba-chan. I'm gonna give this to Shi and then I'm going to take him to Kumo. I feel it's better if he doesn't have to do all that walking if he doesn't have to," Naruto said as he quickly walked off, leaving Tsunade, Inoichi, and Ibiki alone. They all looked at each other and sighed. None of them knew why. Meanwhile, Naruto went into the front door and he saw Komachi patiently waiting for him. "Yo," Naruto said, causing her to look up. He gave a grin to her and held out his hand. Komachi quickly took it while Naruto hoisted her to her feet. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Komachi shook her head and placed a hand to it. "I am well," she said in a little monotone. Naruto chuckled to her and shook his head. He'd get her to lighten up a little more. "Well, alright then. Let's get you home and rest," Naruto said, and he quickly teleported them away, getting the receptionist and a few of the staff to gasp out loud as the portal disappeared. Uzumaki compound. Once they stepped out of the portal, Naruto allowed Komachi to go to her room and sleep for the rest of the day. He then turned his head as he noticed she drinking some water. Everyone soon gathered around Naruto as the blonde held up the scroll that Tsunade had given him. "So how did it go?" Yuri asked. "Komachi-chan cooperated really well. They said that they had no trouble on her part, but her memories are jumbled at best, but they still found a great deal on Akiko and this coup that might be happening for Kumo, Naruto said as he gave the scroll to Shi. He read along its lines and narrowed his eyes. He then quickly furled it and placed it in his pouch with a nod. So she'll be fine then? Gurren asked. Naruto, once again, nodded, which really got a sigh of relief from everyone. Now I think it's best that we get this out of the way, so I'm going to take Shi to the Raikage mansion as quickly as possible, Naruto said. She agreed with his decision as he and Naruto quickly stepped through the same portal that Naruto used. This was just an efficient method rather than anything else. Once they were gone, Gurren and Fuka turned to Yukimaru. Do I really have to wear this kimono, Gurren? Nay. Yukimaru asked. Gurren nodded happily while Yura sighed. Stop moving, Yukimaru-kun, Yura said as she stitched some of it together. Yukimaru gave a little groan from his lips. He would have rather liked to have been at the academy, but he had been given an aptitude test by the teachers and they all figured that he was already genin material, so there was no need to keep him there. It was a problem of finding him a sensei. Raikage Mansion. O was busy signing some documents in his office. He really didn't want to, as he could have been using this time to expend forces in trying to find Akiko, but the only place that they could search was her house and that had no trace of anything. He could only wait for the report from Kamachi by Shi, and he wouldn't get that for another few days from the distance between Kumo and Konoha. It rather irked the man, but he got over it. Suddenly he gasped as a large portal appeared in his office. He narrowed his eyes dangerously as he got to his feet and was ready to counter what was happening. However, he was surprised as Shi and Naruto fell out and landed on the ground. She fell to the floor and panted. Honestly, I will never get used to that, he said, and Naruto patted him on the shoulder apologetically. A cough alerted them both and they noticed giving them a stern glare. Shi grimaced and immediately presented himself to his Raikage. Forgive the sudden intrusion, Raikage-sama. However, Naruto and I felt it would be more time efficient if he was able to bring us here. I have the scroll here with the seal of the Hokage just a half an hour ago, she said, and he hastily placed it on the Raikage's desk. I took it also and unfurled it. He looked down the scroll and he glared dangerously. He read Kamachi's conscious analysis, her dreams, Akiko and her locations, Danzo and the theory of Akatsuki. He never missed anything. Naruto and Shi stayed silent while he did so. He then placed it down and gave an affirmative grunt. Very good, Shi. Tell Konoha that we have received their message and will take affirmative action. We'll also send you a report on what we find. Shi, I want you to return to Konoha for the time being. You'll have a better use there as a liaison than in Kumo currently, said, and Shi seemed rather disheartened at that, but a pat from Naruto told him the real reason of why A was saying that. He then brightened up slightly before acquiescing to his leader's orders. I'll have Team Samui investigate just as soon as they're done with their business, said. Might I ask what business that is? She asked, and narrowed his eyes as he casted a glance to Naruto, getting the blonde rather nervous. Something of a DNA test at the hospital for all of them, said, and she widened his eyes. He looked down while Naruto raised an eyebrow. He turned to Shi and he could see Shi's shocked face. Naruto would see if he couldn't learn more about it later. Which is why we will need a bit of your blood, Shi, said, and she nodded readily. He would make his way towards the hospital soon. We would also like to ask for yours also, brat, said to Naruto. The blonde was shocked to the implication as he turned to Shi. The other blonde nodded while Naruto steadied his breathing. He nodded fast and both left the room. When were you going to tell me about this? Naruto asked angrily. I didn't have the proof and I didn't want you to get your hopes up and then have them destroyed. I want it to be true almost as much as you do. For someone to be that close that I never knew about. I can't live with that. None of them knew their parents and I didn't either. Besides, it wasn't entirely my business if they did tell us or not. It would be them if they told you, she said, and Naruto couldn't deny what he was saying. It would be up to them if they wanted to be with the family or not. Naruto couldn't force them into this life if they didn't want it. However, he would still be there for them if they needed it. Yeah, I suppose you're right, Naruto said as they entered the hospital. She handed the notice from it to the receptionist and she quickly accepted it and walked off. Minutes later, Naruto was groaning from having his blood ejected, and the same could be said for Shi. They quickly placed their clothes back on and Naruto peered into a room to see Team Samui waiting around. He wanted to open the door, but she stopped him. He shook his head to his fellow cousin. How long till they figure it out? Naruto asked. A week or two at the most. Just be patient, she responded, and they just disappeared. They would have to wait, but right now they had to get dressed. Somewhere. Toby stood in front of the waters in front of him as he looked at his newest arm. He clenched it tightly. It had been compressed to fight his body. It was thanks to Zetsu that this was possible. Honestly, Toby figured that it could have been a lot war. On that arm was a black tattoo. He had a feeling of what it was for. This wasn't the arm of a cage, but the arm of one of the only two people to have learned from him. One was the right hand of the Raikage, and the other. Kuro Hanaron, black destructive flower field, Toby shouted as he let out his left hand. Instantly black lightning poured from it and slammed into the water in a heavy crash. Toba's visible eye glared and he grinned to himself. He'd gladly sacrifice all that he needed to bring down the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. According to Zetsu, this was nearly impossible to find. Now Toby wasn't needy about those things, but this was a definite improvement. He just had to get with the rest of the plan. Now the first thing that he had to do was capture the Sanbi Jinchuriki. He also had a good idea of who it was. It just like the previous situation. Did they really think that he wouldn't be able to figure it out? They wouldn't stop his plan. He had too much riding on it. He'd also show the blonde just how hopeless his efforts were in the end. His plan would come to fruition. It wouldn't be stopped as easily as the blonde wanted. Life wasn't that simple. Chapter 37. Quote, I'll never stop dreaming that one day we can be a real family, together, all of us laughing and talking, loving and understanding, not looking at the past but only to the future, by Latoya Jackson. Training Ground 27. Yukimaru was sitting in his temporary training field along with Hanabi Hyuga and Juhi Inuzuka. He was being taught a temporary lesson by a Jonin that had to take over Guren's job for the day since she had security seal barrier maintenance with a few other Jonin. Yukimaru didn't really mind this as he knew how busy his adoptive mother was with her duties, so he didn't fault her for that. In fact, it just gave him the time to get to know some things about those his age, but anyway, back to the current lesson. Yukimaru-kun, are you paying attention? The Jonin asked, causing Hanabi and Juhi to look up from their lessons towards the Uzumaki. Yukimaru snapped out of his stupor before giving an embarrassed blush. Hi, forgive me, he said, and the instructor nodded before looking back down. Hanabi looked at Yukimaru a little longer before snorting and looking back to what their sensei was talking about, which happened to be the making of a certain type of storage seal. And carefully make precise brush strokes from here to here. Then force your chakra through it. With this done, then you can seal all your weapons, clothes, and any number of objects. Now then, can anyone tell me what you can't seal into scrolls? The Jonin asked. Jutsu. Juhi shouted while his dog barked. Hanabi narrowed her eyes and tapped her finger. Well, that is certainly right, Juhi-kun. One can't really seal jutsu into their scrolls. A scroll isn't really designed and seals aren't strong enough to hold such power back in the first place, the Jonin said before Yukimaru raised his hand. Sensei, I don't mean to interrupt your lesson, but if certain factors like the seals, ink, and scrolls are strong enough, then it is possible to seal jutsu and even things more powerful than that, Yukimaru said, getting the unwanted attention turned to him, which made him a little humble, but he tried to keep his head up as a proud user of fuinjutsu that he had learned to use by Naruto, Guren, Kushina, and Fuka. Oh, is that right, Yukimaru-kun? Well then, will you please give us an example of such things? The Jonin asked with a smile. Yukimaru looked at the ground for a second and he could see that Hanabi had the look of him wanting to explain as well. It wasn't in his complete nature to upstart anyone if he didn't have to, but he loved fuinjutsu and he loved his family. Either this Jonin didn't believe that the Uzumaki were fuinjutsu masters, or he was underestimating the power of fuinjutsu. Well, there is the Jinchuriki. They all have seals that bind the Biju to them, and the Biju are stronger than any jutsu that we could think of, Yukimaru proclaimed, getting Hanabi to raise an eyebrow. The young Inuzuka, Juhi, scoffed while the Jonin chuckled. Well, that is technically true, but a few years ago Suna had an unstable Jinchuriki who is now their cage. Do you know why he was unstable? It was because of his seal. It shows that they will break it eventually, the Jonin remarked. That's not true. Kage-Sama's seal was perfectly fine. In fact, it is still in place even though his Biju was taken. The seal was made by amateur sealing teams, so it stands to reason that it would be unstable. If it was sealed by someone like Yondaime-sama, then Gaara-sama would have been fine. Just like Naruto Nissen, Yukimaru said, and Hanabi widened her eyes, and so did Juhi. You mean the dude who's the fucking son of Yondaime-sama? I heard the guy's got a fucking legendary contract. One that's out of this world. It is said that no one apart from his family has seen it, and if they do then they instantly die. It's a rumor by the kids that this is what happened to Asuma-san. You know that dude? Juhi asked, and Yukimaru smirked. Yep, Naruto-nisan is my brother, Yukimaru said while Juhi gasped and Hanabi snorted. She knew such a thing already. Her father had told the entire Hyuga clan of their current friendship bond with the Uzumaki, and Hanabi, Hinata, and Neji were told of all the members of the clan. It also did help that she had heard about Yukimaru's exploits in the Academy of Correcting Teachers and their mistakes of drawing seals. She probably held just a little admiration for him. He's your brother. That's awesome. Wait, then that means that you're a, Juhi said while the Jonin smiled. Juhi, meet Yukimaru Uzumaki. The youngest Uzumaki who's just as talented as the rest of his family. An impressive sight, the Jonin said, getting Yukimaru to blush at the sentiment. Tell me, Yukimaru, how do you know so much about the Biju and the Jinchuriki? Hanabi asked while Yukimaru smiled. Well, it's widely known that Yondaime-sama fought against the Kyuubi, so I know what Guren-san has taught me. A while ago I actually had an encounter with the Sanbi, Yukimaru said while Juhi gasped. The Jonin raised an eyebrow and Hanabi narrowed her eyes. You're shittin' me, right? You were actually near the Biju? Juhi asked while Yukimaru just chuckled to himself. Hanabi remained silent on the issue, instead choosing this time to study the genin next to her. Hi, Guren-chan said that we had a mission by Konoha to investigate, and apparently, my being a Uzumaki, I had special chakra that resonated to the Sanbi, Yukimaru explained. PFF, now you're just making up stories. How could you have chakra that strong? Stop tellin' lies, Juhi said while the Jonin chuckled. Yukimaru sighed while Hanabi just blinked, rather stoically. Oh, it's not a lie, dog boy. Everyone turned around to see Guren drop to the ground. Just like the Hyuga, the Uzumaki clan opted for their own wear as part of their clan and didn't wear the standard Konoha jackets and instead wore casual clothes, well, with the exception of Naruto and Kushina, who kept their Hinokin attire, well, most of the time. They did have their responsibilities to think about, but anyway. Yukimaru-kun really does have special chakra. In fact, he's just like the rest of us, having exceptional chakra and all that. Actually, if I had to guess, then I would tell you that the Uzumaki have a very wide range of exceptional chakra. I have the ability to make crystals, Fuka-san has the ability to take chakra from others, Tayuya has exceptional genjutsu, very strong for our clan, Riza is probably the best. Just recently we've found that she's able to visibly use her chakra to control someone else's. Shi's chakra allows him to have perfect control of summoning and converting light to his own abilities. Komachi, well, we're still finding out about her. Kushina is able to use her chakra to manifest chakra chains that not only sap chakra, but also restrict even the toughest movement. That same ability was passed to Naruto-kun, and his network is the most complicated. His chakra is quite potent. More so than any Uzumaki in the clan for reasons we don't know, but that's enough bragging. Come on, Yukimaru, Naruto-kun should be finished building the training fields and dojo for the house. Thank you for teaching him, Guren said while Yukimaru stood to his feet. Oh, it's no problem. It seemed more like he was teaching us, the Jonin said while Guren and Yukimaru bowed before walking off. Wait. The two Uzumaki turned to see Hanabi standing to her feet as she walked over to them. You said that it was possible to seal jutsu. I would like to see the truth to your statement, Hanabi said with a little fire gleaming in her eyes. Guren looked back to Yukimaru and he nodded while she sighed and snickered. Well, it is possible. You just need to have the right person doing it. Mind a demonstration with me, Guren prolonged for the Jonin's name. Aoba Yamashiro, he said, and Guren nodded. Thank you. Now then, if you would please step over there, then I will prove this point, Guren said, and Aoba nodded, though it was a reluctant one. He stood next to a tree post while Guren smiled assuringly. Juhi grinned from ear to ear while Hanabi folded her arms and watched. Yukimaru didn't seem fazed, as he had known what he was talking about. After all, he studied hard to make his family proud of him. Ready when you are, Guren said, and Aoba nodded. Very well then. I hope you know what you're doing, Guren-san, he said aloud. Oh, don't worry about me, Guren said, and Aoba just nodded as he swiftly went through his hand signs before he opened his mouth. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu, Aoba shouted as he sent a large fireball in Guren's direction. Juhi gasped and closed his eyes, but Yukimaru and Hanabi watched on as Guren smiled. As fast as they could see, Guren whipped out a scroll and an ink pen. She quickly wrote across it, her strokes smooth and fluid. As she quickly finished, had held the scroll out in front of her as the fireball collided with the scroll, instantly disappearing altogether. Aoba widened his eyes while Juhi opened his own to see the sight of Guren with a calm smile. There is a reason that Fuinjutsu isn't a popular shinobi art. It's because people fail to see the true wonders that it holds and don't have the patience that comes with learning it. Thank you for your time, Guren said as she threw the scroll to Aoba, who caught it and glanced in awe. Juhi gasped and Hanabi narrowed her eyes. It seems you were right, Hanabi said, and Yukimaru nodded. Yeah, I get that a lot, he said while she glanced towards him. Well, that's enough of demonstrations. Come Yukimaru, we have to continue your training and later we'll have you gather your yukata. We look forward to tonight's dinner, Hyuga-san, Guren said politely, which got Yukimaru surprised. The Hyuga are waiting to welcome the Uzumaki into their compound. Thank you for the demonstration. It was very insightful, Hanabi said while Guren and Yukimaru walked away with the latter waving to the youngest Hyuga main branch female. Guren looked at the scene and chuckled. They grow up so fast. Uzumaki compound. BB boss, we're all done. See, can we please dispel now? The clones asked as they finished the newly made dojo as well as set up the training field by clearing out the trees. Naruto looked out into the field and nodded. Yeah, we're good here. Great job you guys, Naruto said as he dispelled his clones. Seems that even having the Shinigami's extra power to drive them wasn't doing anything for their natural endurance. Maybe Naruto had to do something about that with his Honsho later. It was a pity that everyone else seemed to have something to do. Kushina was going over something with Yugao, Yura and Yuri were out eating, Riza and Tayuya were just enjoying the feeling of being alive, and she was doing some reports in his room. Fuka was doing her hair in her room. Seriously, what was with her and her hair? Oh yeah, and Fujika's was currently being harassed by Tenten. It was one of the few times that Naruto wasn't even sure if he could laugh at the pitiful display of pleading that Tenten did before Fujika's that made Naruto sigh at one point. This is where you were, he heard a voice and turned his head to see Komachi looking at him. Her face as stoic as usual. Naruto gave her a smile as Komachi effortlessly sat down next to him. What's up? Naruto asked, feeling the gentle sun on his face. We were so close. I don't understand how I never knew about you. Both of us were in Konoha and we never knew it. This family, it's warm, but am I right for this, having done the things that I barely remember? I do not know. What is my place in this family? Komachi asked as Naruto sighed. Honestly, I don't even know my place in this family, but does it matter? You already have a place as yourself. It's not like your memories are going to come back instantly. Take your time, Komachi-chan. I'll be there with you every step of the way for it. I will always protect my family, Naruto said, and Komachi shifted slightly. What is it to protect your family? From what I remember, I only protected Konoha as a whole. I never had a family to protect. I do not understand this concept, Komachi said, and Naruto poked her cheek. She turned to him and raised an eyebrow while the blonde snickered. Your cheeks are so weird, Komachi-chan, Naruto said, and Komachi blinked before her eyebrow twitched. Please stop that, Naruto-san, she said, but Naruto persisted. He snickered as he continued to do so before Komachi grabbed his hand. Enough, she spoke in annoyance before she noticed Naruto give her a solid look. I think protecting your family is the same as protecting your body. Make sure it functions and that it's always in perfect shape. We know what is best as a family, Naruto said, and Komachi quickly let go of his hand. She nodded and Naruto stood to his feet. Now then, let's get you outfitted for a yukata. I think you'd look good in orange, Naruto said, and Komachi blinked. That is a horrid color to go with my hair, Naruto, she claimed, and Naruto gasped. How could you say such things? I filled it out quite well, Naruto said while Komachi nodded. I shall take your word for it then, she spoke, and Naruto groaned. He then pouted and placed his head in his hands. You're no fun, you know. But I'll rid you of that soon enough, Naruto said, getting Komachi to look at him, but she didn't say anything and only watched as Naruto stood to his feet and held out his hand. Well, it doesn't have to be a fancy thing, I guess. Let's just get you your yukata for tonight, Naruto said, and Komachi took it to stand on her feet. Just so long as it is not orange, Naruto-san, Komachi said, getting Naruto to growl. Ignoring. Naruto returned as he opened the door and walked out with Komachi following him. He had never seen it, but Komachi's face never changed. However, her eyes held just a little mirth inside them at her attempt at making fun of her cousin. It felt good. Nighttime. Yukimaru, do you have your yukata on neatly? Gurren asked, and Yukimaru nodded with a small smile on his face. The young adopted Uzumaki wore a light green yukata that Gurren had bought him. Fuka and she came down the stairs wearing their own yukatas as they gathered into the living room. She adjusted his clothes to welcome a bit of comfort. Fuka wore a dark red yukata while she opted for a simple black one of some fancy design. He didn't mind things like this. Hi Gurren-san, Yukimaru said as Yura and Yuri came down also wearing bright red yukata. Komachi then appeared after them in a light blue one. I fucking hate this shitty thing. Why do I have to go? Tayuya growled coming down the stairs. Right behind her was Riza as the older redhead snarled. Shut up. You're going and that's an order. Riza said, making Tayuya grit her teeth before ultimately sighing in frustration. People asked her all the time where she got her damn attitude from. Tayuya had always replied that it wasn't their fucking business to know, but now she knew where she got it. Her damned mother. She should have guessed. Honestly, I liked it better when I was dead. Then I wouldn't have to listen to your mouth so constantly, Tayuya said, and Riza gripped her daughter's head. What was that, shorty? Don't think that just because you could take on some Konoha that you're able to beat me. I was kicking ass long before you were born, Riza claimed. Sure, whatever you say, Tayuya said, getting the others to chuckle at them. Fujika's was watching the scene with a small smile on his face. This was the family that his master had worked so hard to bring to a reality. Fujika's wasn't sure, but he wondered how long it had been since he had been surrounded by such an atmosphere. If this was the way that all Uzumaki came together, then the world could learn a lot from them. He was glad to be in the service of his Shikyo. Soon Kushina and Naruto came down the stairs and the blonde couldn't help but stare at his mother. Her wearing her red kimono with white flowers. Her lovely hair that swayed with her body. He loved the way that she did that. He didn't know why, but ever since he had revived her she had just been there with him. He knew that it was because she had already been gone for most of his life and wanted to make up for lost time as his mother, but it had quickly grown to something more. Sometimes he wondered how things would be if he hadn't taken that chance to tell her his true feelings, but now he had them and he wouldn't let go of them. Kushina turned and noticed Naruto looking at her and smiled. You know, even Minato never looked at me so intensely before. What is it? Kushina asked, and Naruto blinked. He shook his head and chuckled as he rubbed the back of his head. It's just that you're so beautiful, Ka-chan, Naruto said, getting Kushina to blush. She chuckled as she jabbed Naruto in the shoulder, getting her son to wince. What are you talking about so suddenly, Databane? Come on, let's get going, Kushina said, and Naruto nodded. Everyone ready? Naruto asked. Gurren and Yukimaru nodded while Yura quickly made one adjustment to Yuri's yukata and nodded as well. Fuka and Kushina nodded as they grinned to each other. Riza nodded while Tayuya grumbled, but a stern look from her mother made her groan as she said something incoherent. She and Komachi nodded as well while they stood up and Kushina opened the door. They all walked out while Naruto turned back to Fujika's. Don't wanna come? Naruto asked, and Fujika's shook his head. I am simply at your service, Uzumaki-sama. I shall keep the guard over your house, Fujika said, and Naruto sighed with a nod. Wow, he's just Mr. Personality, isn't he? Gari asked while Dan sighed. You have no idea. Well, I just think that Fujika-san is more traditional than most. He did die around the Second Great Shinobi War, so I could see that happening. Honestly, I think he's just been in service to people too long, Dan replied. Gari grumbled and shook his head. Speaking of being in service to someone, Gari, what made you even want to be in the service of Shikyo-sama in the first place? He is a Konoha shinobi after all. I have no problems with following him because I can feel that he's not like the rest. What are your reasons? Pakura asked, and soon all eyes were on Gari as the Iwa shinobi narrowed his eyes. There is no real hidden meaning or anything. Also, it's not because he's the summoner to the shinigami. During the war, well, to be precise, the Third Great War, just before my death, I had the opportunity to see his father in action, Gari said, getting Dan to raise an eyebrow, Pakura to do the same, Suiran to seem confused, and Yahiko to continue listening with a little more earnest. Who was his father? Yahiko asked curiously. Dan chuckled when he heard that, as did Pakura. Gari just gave a little grin while Yahiko and Suiran stared at each other in confusion. I had met him during one of the field battles. It's true that he decimated the entirety of our forces in one fell swoop, and I was surprised by it. Honestly, the only reason that they even didn't exceed over 1,000 was because of myself and the explosion core. As we retreated, he and I locked eyes for but a second, but that second was like an eternity. I could see the strength mentally of a leader in his eyes. For just that second I was staring at a very powerful man, and the look that I saw in that young boy's eyes was the very same. I do not care that he is the son of my nation's most hated enemy. I respect him, and to see his legacy succeed is what I hope to accomplish. To see where his road takes him. I do believe that he has already surpassed his father right here. Having us as summons. That alone seems like potential enough to let me be near him. After all, just like his father, he is the only person I know who has created a time-space ninjutsu, Gari said, getting the others to nod in agreement. His father is the Ondaime Hokage of Konoha, Minato Namikaze. I know of the man because Orochimaru expressed a deep hatred for Minato-san for taking the Hokage position from him. He's considered to be an amazing man, Kimimaro said, and everyone felt silent. Still, we've all decided to follow an amazing man ourselves. We'll just have to see where he leads us, but we'll back him up no matter what, right? Suiran asked, and everyone agreed. Right, they all said in surprising unison. Meanwhile, Konoha stared in awe as the entire Uzumaki clan had walked through the streets and came up to the Hyuga compound. Kushina knocked on the door and it immediately opened. Kushina-sama, Hiyashi-sama and Hanako-sama have been waiting for you, a side branch member said, and Kushina smiled. Thank you very much. We're happy to be invited, Kushina said as the Uzumaki clan walked inside. As they did, Fuka and Yukimaru took this time to see around the inside of the Hyuga compound. It was definitely largest one that they had ever seen. They could see side and main branch members looking at them all as they were escorted through the main building. Sheesh, these fuckers act like they've never seen a fucking Uzumaki before, Tayuya said, getting Naruto to snicker. Well, they only had Nissan to look at. It's no wonder that they're surprised, Yura said while Naruto gasped. The others snickered with nods while Naruto turned his head. Don't think I haven't forgotten about my revenge on you for what you did to me, Yura-chan, Naruto said, and Yura's eyebrow twitched. What? She asked, and Naruto smirked. He then looked at her with a mischievous grin while Kushina tapped him. Now Sochi, we're in someone else's compound. Be nice. Okay. Kushina asked as she rubbed her son's cheek, and Naruto sighed. Alright, Ka-chan, Naruto said while Kushina smiled. Riza and Gurren snickered to each other while she, Kamachi and Yukimaru were walking closely beside one another. Is this your first time inside of a compound? She asked, and Kamachi remained as stoic as she usually was. This is probably not my first experience, but it is the first experience that I remember, so I shall say yes for now, Kamachi said, and then looked down. How about you? She asked Yukimaru. I think it is, but it's sort of weird to see them all staring at us, Yukimaru said to her. Yura and Yuri nodded as the latter sighed. Yeah, but then again they aren't Uzumaki crazy like us, so we're something different, Yuri responded. Yeah, sure. We're a clan claimed to be wilder than even the Inuzuka clan for our hot-headed tempers. Case is Kushi-chan, Riza spoke while Kushina growled. Shut it, Riza, you have a lot worse of a temper than I do, Kushina countered back. I'd just rather not be in the middle when the both of you have your tempers, she mumbled while Kushina and Riza glared at him. He then looked up and cleared his throat. And no offense, he stated quickly to save himself. The two Uzumaki women then backed off of their little cousin. To the others around them it was an enjoyable sight to see. Right this way, Kushina-sama, the escort said as they walked up the stairs. Everyone followed him and they came up to a door. The escort knocked against the door and spoke. Hiyashi-sama, the Uzumaki family has arrived, he said in the voice that Naruto recognized as Hiyashi came from the door. Escort them in, Hiyashi said, and the escort bowed as he opened the door. Instantly the Uzumaki family walked through the door as they saw a rather large multitude of tables ready to seat them. Hiyashi was at the head of the tables and along its sides were Hinata, Hanabi, and Neji. Hanako and Hazashi sat on the two sides of Hiyashi, which also made Naruto point out that a few of the clan's elders were there as well. He raised an eyebrow before he noticed Hisashi and Hanako looking at him. Both Bode and Naruto gave a slight nod. Kushina-san, thank you for taking the time to accept our invitation, Hiyashi said, and Kushina smiled. Well, it is fine, Hiyashi-san. After all, you have done much for my son and I. We appreciate it. I'm glad to know that my son is on very good terms with you, Kushina said, and Hiyashi turned to Naruto. The blonde waved and Hiyashi gave an acknowledged bow. Yo Neji, Hinata-chan. Naruto said, and Neji waved while Hinata blushed, but said her hello just like Neji did. Please be seated then, Uzumaki family. It's a great night, Hanako said, and everyone of the family agreed. They quickly got themselves situated to the tables and everyone instantly noticed Yukimaru beginning to talk with Hanabi about what had happened earlier. Hanako smiled and so did Gurren. They snickered to each other, but none said anything on the matter. So Naruto, where have you and Sasuke been? Hardly any of us see you anymore. I think the last we saw you was Asuma-san's funeral, Neji said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. He gave a heavy sigh, but he noticed that Hinata seemed to be curious of his answer as well, though Naruto noticed that she couldn't look him in the eye for various reasons. Hiyashi, Hisashi and Hanako naturally knew where the blonde had been and what he had been doing. To some testament of friendship between them, Naruto and Hiyashi frequently exchanged letters via a messenger bird between the two. The stuff Naruto had done, generally, wasn't top secret, so there wasn't really anything keeping him from talking with Hiyashi about it if he so wished or was ordered not to. I know what you mean, Neji. I haven't seen you guys for a while. Sasuke and I have just been out doing the various missions. Ba-chan talked about me keeping an eye on Sasuke. Him, myself, Ka-chan, Kakashi-sensei, and Yugao-chan became a team. That's why we're not here a lot, Naruto said, and Neji nodded. A lot of people miss you, Naruto-kun, Hinata said rather meekly, and Naruto couldn't deny that he felt that way too. And I miss them too, but I'm busy, you guys know how it is. But how are Ino, Choji and Shikamaru doing? Naruto asked. Well, Otu-san has taken the role as temporary sensei for the team since he returned from his mission by the late Sandaime-sama. Choji and Ino are dealing with while Shikamaru looks after Kurenai-san. She's taken a leave due to having Asuma-san's child, Neji said, and Naruto nodded with a heavy sigh. Hiyashi knew that sigh very well. The sigh that came from two conflicting things, ideals coming to clash with each other in a person making a decision. He knew why too. Asuma must have said something to Naruto, which is why the Sarutobi Jonin wasn't around. I see, well, I'm glad that they are all right. How about Kurenai-san? Naruto asked as Neji and Hinata looked at each other. Kushina patted Naruto's shoulder, but the blonde didn't deter from his question, so Hinata answered. Kurenai-sensei is doing very well. She wishes to apologize for her outburst to you for asking the impossible from you. She and Shikamaru-kun knew that just because you have a contract that it doesn't change that Asuma-sensei is gone. It's one of the reasons that she walks around the village to find you, so that she may apologize, Hinata said, and Naruto looked at the table. Yura and Yuri frowned as they looked to each other. Naruto just nodded and closed his eyes. What am I going to do? I already said that I couldn't do anything. If I bring back Asuma now just as Kurenai apologizes to me, then she'll know something is up, and so will Shikamaru. Even if I managed to convince Asuma to give me some kind of fake identity, they would still try to attempt to find a connection. Then there are that old lady's words to me, Naruto thought, and Neji glanced towards she. He could see the young man waiting as politely as he could. Neji really had no idea that she was from Kumo, but he was sure that he had never seen the blonde before. Honestly, he and Naruto could almost be brothers except for the volumes of their color of hair. So you are Naruto-san's family. What is your relationship to him? Neji asked she as he turned to him. Hi, I am a Uzumaki. As for my relationship, then I am Naruto's cousin. My name is Shi Uzumaki. It's a pleasure to meet you, he said, and Neji nodded. Pleased to meet you as well, Neji said, and after he said that the food was served to everyone as the elders began to eat. Yukimaru and Hanabi ate as well while Gurren and Fuka settled to the pleasant food. Riza and Tayuya began to eat as well, followed by Hanako, Hisashi, Neji, Hinata and Hiyashi. So Ka-chan, you were gone for most of the day. What were you doing? Naruto asked, and Kushina cleared her throat while she gave a little sigh. The council had a meeting today that required me to attend. Since learning of the Uzumaki and their relation to Konoha as well as Mito Bachan being the Shidaim's wife, then the Uzumaki are considered as a noble clan. I would like to thank Hiyashi for his help though. The friendship of the Hyuga and the Uzumaki is a very satisfying one. Databane, Kushina spoke and Hiyashi nodded. Naruto-san is a very good friend of mine and I like to show my gratitude to my friends, Hiyashi said rather stoically, but no one took him up on it. Kushina and Naruto just nodded while the latter chuckled sheepishly. It's no big deal, Hiyashi. You helped me out a great deal. It was the least I could do, Naruto said, and Hiyashi turned to Hanako. Well, that's not true actually, Naruto-san. It's actually thanks to you that I have an announcement to make as well. I'm expecting, Hanako said as Hanabi widened her eyes. Hinata turned to her mother in shock while Hiyashi sipped his tea. Naruto coughed and so did Kushina. The elders looked really surprised, as did Neji and Hizashi. Really? Hanabi and I are going to have another sibling? Hinata asked and Hanako nodded. Hiyashi cleared his throat and folded his arms. It is for this reason that Hanako has not been training recently. We have just had Shizune and Tsunade-sama confirm it, Hiyashi said while Kushina smiled. Hanako, that's great, Databane, Kushina said, and Naruto snickered. You're saying Databane a lot, Ka-chan. You're flustered, Naruto said while Kushina jabbed her son, and lover, in the arm. Or rather than flustered, this is excitement, Databane, Kushina claimed, and everyone chuckled while Naruto rubbed his arm. Still violent as ever, Kushina. You really haven't changed, Riza said, and Kushina huffed while she pouted her cheeks. Yura and Yuri snickered while Fuka chuckled to herself. Komachi just blinked at the scene rather confused, but it was pleasant to look at. Still, this is amazing news, Hanako. You should be proud, Hizashi said, getting Hanako to agree with him. I know, and I am Hiyashi-san, but I saw the strangest thing. I had seen Kaharu-san talking with one of the doctors along with Homura-san. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but they had been given some medical records. It seemed really weird, but as they left, Kaharu-san looked at me. When our eyes met, she just gave a small smile before walking away. I'm not sure why that is. Did I do something? Hanako asked, and everyone looked to each other. You never told me this, Hiyashi said, and Hanako looked down. Well, it didn't seem like such a big deal to me, so I just let it go without much of a problem. I didn't see anything wrong with what she was doing, so I just decided to leave well enough alone. When she left, I had asked the doctor about her, and he said that she and Homura were curious about some things and she had paid over several visits to the morgue, Hanako said, and everyone raised an eyebrow. Komachi and she narrowed their eyes at this, and so did Naruto.